Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're interviewing Rachel Greiman, photographer and copywriter at greenchairstories.com to learn about the importance of the words that we put on our website. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey, welcome back, my photo friends. Look at you. You are here once again. You showed up. You are ready to learn. I'm so ready for this. I'm so thankful for you. This week is going to be a great episode. As I said earlier, it is with Rachel Greiman of Green Chair Stories. She's a photographer, but also a very talented copywriter, which is something that's pretty unique because in the world of photography, not many of us are very good with words. That's why we chose more of a visual medium. But Rachel is a great combination of, combining photography and the words that she is now doing copywriting for photographers because she's realized that some of us are just terrible at it and we need some help. So this is going to be a fun episode because not only, are we going to learn a lot about Rachel's journey into photography, and there's a lot of things. She's actually a family documentary photographer. So she goes into people's houses and just does like a day in the life type session. So we get into a lot of that and, dive deep there. Really interesting stuff before we get into some of the hard stuff, which premium members are going to hear. I let Rachel rip apart my website. I send her my website. She goes through the words and she tells me, what I'm doing right, which is not very many things, and what I'm doing wrong, which is quite a bit. So I know that if you have a website, you're going to be able to, take the knowledge that you hear today and then apply that to your own website as well. It's going to give you, just like a good base, because in a world where everybody's photos look good these days and, the average family or wedding client doesn't really know the difference between maybe photography styles or good and great photography, we're kind of chosen by the words on our website. So it's arguably one of the most important things. So I allow Rachel to do that, and again, rip apart my website and give me some insight as far as what things I could be doing better. Now, these changes I'm going to be making ASAP into my website, and I will keep you updated, let you know how that goes. But before we get into the interview itself, I wanted to share something really fun and interesting with you real quick, and that is right now, I am in the middle of editing a wedding. So last weekend, I went down to Kansas City to shoot a wedding. Beautiful wedding. It was a couple who, well, originally, they planned their wedding to be this 300 guest epic. They were supposed to get married in October of 2020. So they contacted me and booked me to be their wedding photographer back in, I guess it was August of 2019, not knowing what was going to happen to the world and have a pandemic. So there was a lot of back and forth as far as what was going to happen. They had to postpone their wedding date. Obviously, they moved it around. They changed locations. Lots of things happened, but ultimately they settled on this past weekend in Kansas City. And I gotta say, it was it was much smaller than the 300 guest epic that they had originally planned for. I believe there was just 12 people, but it was so beautiful. It was so much fun because, a lot of times at weddings, couples feel like a lot of pressure to make sure that they talk to everybody and, give them some time and attention, which is fine. And that's great. You want to appreciate the people who came to celebrate with you. But there's a totally different feeling when the entire wedding is so small that you're not spending your entire day just greeting people and talking to them, but actually enjoying your wedding day itself. So it was a wonderful wedding. But now I am in the middle of editing this wedding and I get to relive those moments, which is always fun. I love this part of editing, but it reminded me of pretty much my first wedding, the first wedding that I ever shot solo, and I had to edit it myself. And it took me more than a month to edit that wedding. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to do this every weekend. I can't be taking a month to edit photo. I'm going to be so backed up so quickly. But part of the issue was that, at the time I didn't have a style. I wasn't super familiar with Lightroom. So every photo I had to go in and tweak settings individually. And, ultimately, I look back on those photos today and think, what was I thinking? I should have had a better understanding of how Lightroom worked and how editing worked as well. So when I started the Beginner Photography podcast, I wanted to create some resources to help you, new photographers in your photography journey. And that's one place where I started, and that is with Lightroom presets. So I know that, you look on the internet, there's presets everywhere. We're used to going on, Instagram, clicking a button on a preset, and then your photo is magically transformed. But in the world of professional photography, presets they're different, right? Presets aren't meant to be a one click and done solution. They are meant to give you a base. So still to this day, I use a preset that I've created for myself that is more or less my signature that I put on my photos. My photos are about 97% of the way done in camera, and then that last 3% is the preset that puts my signature on the photos. But for new photographers, I have created 52 free Lightroom presets for you to download, so that not only can you, get creative ideas as far as what can be done with your photos, but also speed up your editing workflow. Because we didn't get into photography because we like spending time in front of the computer and editing. We got into photography because we like shooting, we like getting out there, we like taking pictures with our cameras. So these presets are designed to not only speed up your workflow, but obviously, well, yeah, speed up your workflow and get you out so that you can continue to shoot more. They give you a great base, so it's a lot of fun, and it's really helped shape my style of photography. So I want to invite you to download them for yourself. Like I said, I want to give them to you absolutely free, and you can download them at freephotographypresets.com, which I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes as well if you are driving. But again, if you are at a computer, if you're on your phone, just head to freephotographypresets.com and you can sign up for your 52 free Lightroom presets. Speed up your editing, get more creative, and unlock the full potential of the photos that you have already taken yourself. So that's it. I know that you're really going to enjoy them. Also, I share an instructional video on how to not only install them, but how to get started with presets and how to use them effectively. So again, lots of stuff, totally free. I want you to have it. Enjoy. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get on into this week's interview with Rachel Greiman. Rachel, today you are a documentary family photographer. You go into people's homes, you photograph them in their quote unquote most, mundane yet sacred moments of their family life, of growing their family, of just being a family. Before you kind of got to where you are now, I love to start off with just like, when was the first time that you knew that photography was going to play a large role in your life?
That's a great question. I think there were several like kind of milestones in my life that led me to that, but I think the initial one was I was in high school and I was the yearbook photographer because my mom always had cameras laying around growing up. There's 5 kids in my family. I'm one of 5. And she photographed every sport. I mean, we were all athletes. And so she was at every game with her camera. And it was like the most exciting day when her film came back because, I'm old. And I just loved getting those rolls of film back, and even if there were only 3 good photos in it, it was like, oh, you nailed it, mom. And it was
Yeah,
just
that was a good
so
roll.
neat.
3 good
Yeah,
photos.
exactly. And she always gave away all the photos to like other kids on the teams, and they loved having photos of themselves. And so I think from a really young age, I just saw how powerful like just giving someone a good photo of themselves can be, doing something that they love. And then so I was like, I needed to do some extracurriculars in high school. So I was like, oh, I'll be the yearbook photographer. I've always played around with my mom's camera. And then when I was a senior, my mom bought a digital camera, and it was like the first SLR I ever held. And I bullied her into it for sure. I was like, because then I can use it for my yearbook images and I don't have to develop them by hand in the darkroom. And so I took every photo class that my high school offered and did all of my developing in the dark room. And then got the digital, and I was just like, this is phenomenal. This is, the wave of the future. And then I ended up being a photojournalism major in college because I loved that. I didn't really love anything besides writing. And my experience in yearbook in high school. And so I just took both of those and I was like, photojournalism sounds great. It's the only two things I liked about academics. And truthfully, I picked my college because they had a very successful soccer team. And so that's why I went there. And then when I found out that I could major in that, it just opened up this whole world of like career possibility for me. And again, I'm old. Digital wasn't really a thing yet. Like it wasn't accessible to college students. So we learned everything on film and everything was in the dark room. And just kind of learning that process of photography was really exciting to me. And that eventually channeled into what I do now with families.
Did that feel like a step back from you, from shooting on film, getting that digital camera from your mom, and then having to go back to film when in college?
Not really a step back, more just like it was actually a really good lesson in privilege for me because my parents could have afforded to give me a digital camera, and being with everybody else in my major, it was like, oh, this isn't a common thing. Not everybody can just go out and spend. It was probably like several $1,000s for those nice DSLRs that were coming out in 2005. So, and honestly, I loved the dark room. I
Mm-hmm.
loved spending time in there. I'm not a big person on alone time or quiet time. I'm a huge extrovert, but it felt like one of the only spaces that I felt really comfortable with silence and being alone.
Oh wow, that's it. I've never heard it explained that way. I love that. So I do want to go back though to those earlier days
Mm-hmm.
because there was kind of a jump there from my mom took pictures of us playing sports
Yeah.
to you know what, I'm gonna go to college for this.
Yeah.
So when you first started playing around with your camera or with your mom's camera, I'm assuming that it was a point and shoot. Is that right?
The digital
Like
one?
the first, no, first, like in the beginning when you were a kid, going to
No,
sports games. It was also an SLR.
yeah, it was also, she always had like interchangeable lenses. She always
Gotcha.
had nice gear. That
Mm-hmm.
was something she always invested in. And she just really took a lot of pride in being able to create like some of the only really nice photos that somebody wouldn't have to pay for, like pay a
Right.
professional for. She was a hobbyist for sure, but she also did just a really nice job.
Okay. Okay. So then, when when you would take that camera from your mom
Mm-hmm.
and you would go out and take photos for yourself, what was the hardest part? Like, what was the learning curve like from you? Because most film cameras. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but most film cameras, at least back in the day, were mostly full manual. I'm not sure if
Mm-hmm.
hers had like automatic modes. Could you kind of explain that to me?
I'm trying to remember when I was in like middle school and would fool around with the camera, she didn't even have autofocus.
Okay. Yeah.
Like
So
it was
full
like
manual.
full manual.
Yeah. So then let's stay
Um,
there. Let's stay
yeah.
there. So when you're taking photos, how did you figure out, what was going to be kind of an accurate exposure so that you didn't waste, $15 on a roll of film?
I think she taught me metering.
Okay.
Like I think she taught me to like get it and get the light meter in the right spot. Or I
Hmm.
should say, what is it, bracketing? Is that what it's called? I'm like going back into the depths
No,
of like,
if it's the
yeah,
that should
find the
be the
light
light
meter
meter.
in the center and then take one image on either end of it.
Oh yes, I gotcha. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so is that bracketing? I like can't
Yeah.
remember. Yes, I have a degree in photography. Um, but I think she taught me that. But then by the time I was in high school, it was a much higher tech camera
Hmm. Hmm.
because by then she was like really trying to create, stronger images and she was sick of wasting money on film. So I think she
Sure.
had like upped her gear. But then I remember the camera she gave me in high school to use in all my classes was that full manual, like really difficult to know what you're doing camera, but everybody in my class had that.
Sure.
So, and that's exactly what our photo teacher was teaching us how to use. So he was the one that really taught me the mechanics of it.
So when you were out and you were photographing yourself, let's say middle school. Let's go back to middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is there a photo that you can think of, maybe in your head, that stands out as something that was really powerful to you, that kind of solidified that maybe this is the direction that I want to go?
Probably not from middle school. That was probably just for fun. But there are several from high school that I remember being like, oh, like I remember we had to do a lesson on like movement
Hmm.
and trying to capture somebody and blurring the background, but keeping them in focus the whole time.
Oh yeah.
And I took a picture of, I think it was like 2 years ago. I took a picture of me and my friend. And we were my sister's boyfriend like sliding across our laundry room on a chair, and I nailed it. Like he was like perfectly in focus and the whole
Uh-huh.
background was blurred. And I remember getting it out in the dark room and being like, oh, I crushed this.
Yeah.
Like this turned out so great. And I remember thinking, oh, how cool that you can really create a whole world in a photograph that's true and realistic and still documentary or um, photojournalistic in nature, but it still is like it's an effect, you know?
Right.
So that image sticks out to me. And I think when I started photographing for yearbook and I would go to games and I could get some without any blur or without any movement, like in the middle of a soccer game, I always felt really, really proud of those images because it was like usually you looking back at the yearbook photos and they're not great from high
Right.
school students,
Yeah.
and mine were not all great either, but I do remember being really proud of the sports images I took, probably because that's what my mom did, so I was like, oh, I can be like my mom in this area.
Uh-huh. Okay, so then when let's go back to the photojournalism side. So now you're in college,
Mm-hmm.
you're learning as much as you can about just how to document what's going around and telling a story,
Yeah.
with your camera. Was the goal at that point to work for a newspaper, or was it to, document families? And I guess how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I loved telling stories always. I've always loved that. I've always loved writing. I have always loved interviewing people and hearing kind of their background. That's really interesting to me. And I picked photojournalism because I didn't, I felt like there were jobs there. Like I didn't want to
Hmm.
be a fine art photography major because I was like, what do you do with that? I don't get that. But I was like, oh, I could work for a newspaper or I could do this. And I volunteered at a lot of nonprofits throughout college, and I always photographed and told the stories of the people that we served or the people that I worked with. And then that became my career path for a long time. I worked in nonprofits after college, and I was always the writer and photographer at the various nonprofits. And that is really where my photojournalism degree got put to the best use, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and then, so I worked at probably 4 different nonprofits doing writing and photography. And then in 2014, I had people from my church actually start asking me to take pictures of their families. And I noticed that I really, really liked all the images where I wasn't posing anyone. I was really bad at posing people, and I still am. I'm really bad at it. And I'm woman enough to admit it. And my best images and the ones that the families liked the most were the ones where I wasn't asking the 2-year-old to listen to me and I was just photographing the moments in front of me. And then I found Kirsten Lewis, who I call the godmother of documentary family photography. She basically invented the genre. And I saw a class on Creative Live that she taught where she did like a 72-hour session with the family,
Oh my
and I was
gosh.
like, this is what I want to do. This is it. I like done, signed. This is all I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I slowly started transitioning out of my full-time job and I started my business, and then I started doing documentary family, and it was really all the same elements of telling stories at nonprofits and telling stories of, my subjects and assignments in college, just geared toward families.
That is incredible. I love to hear that story, and I think that a lot of the listeners are going to resonate with that a lot as
Mm-hmm.
well because we all kind of get some sort of education in photography. I take that back. Some people just, go to Costco, buy the camera. Now, where
Right.
do I start? Right?
Yeah.
I understand that, but there's also a large portion of people who started, maybe a few years ago. They were interested in photography. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
gets to this point, and now they're like, I could leave my job. Like maybe I could do
Mm-hmm.
something with this.
Yeah.
And that's what you did, and you've obviously had success now,
Mm-hmm.
which is wonderful to hear. So again, I know that listeners are gonna really appreciate your take on that. So w- now that let's talk about when you did decide to do that, right? So you jumped all in. You already had the education in photojournalism.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of got, I hate to say a head start there, but
Right.
when we think back to our earliest images, it's typically just like, oh, these are garbage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you already have a little bit of that education there, maybe it's not so far. So I would love to know if you had to think back to maybe that first family session that you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's something that sticks out to you as oh my gosh, I would never do that today.
Well, I mean, like the whole thing was posed. So I would never do
Oh,
that now.
yeah, okay, I see. So hold on. Well, then why did you take that approach? What if you went through photojournalism, you
Hmm.
knew like let's capture the story here,
Yeah.
let's not interfere. Why did you decide I'm going to switch things up and just go a route I know nothing about and pose these people?
Yeah. Well, when people from my church asked me to take photos of them, they just knew that I was a photographer for a nonprofit. Like they just knew that was my job. And
Hmm.
I told them I've never shot a family before in my life. Like I've only ever done photojournalism. I did not know that documentary family photography existed then, probably for
Ah,
the first year of my business. So I literally probably went on Pinterest and looked at, I'm sure that I did that.
right.
Went on Pinterest and looked at images of like what family photographers do because I had no idea. And I told them like up front, they probably paid me $50 if they even paid me at all for that session. And I was like, just emulating everything that I saw. Nothing was, or nothing felt original. But even in that session, I remember the images I shared were ones that were not posed.
Hmm.
And because they were the only ones that I really liked. Um, and so I even from the first sessions, I could feel a draw toward that. I just didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know that. I just assumed everybody wanted to go to a park or a field and have images of themselves and their kids on their best day in their best clothes.
Right.
And now I would never do that. I would never do any of it. But
Right.
it was valuable to, it wasn't, I think that style of photography is valuable. I am just not the person to do it because I'm not good at it.
Of course, of course. And I think the listeners understand that. We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about this many times. I fully understand that. I interview pet photographers. I'm not going to photograph pets. That's not
Right.
my thing,
I am
But
so like, I can't even take pictures of my own dog.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I absolutely get that. So, where you're at today, I would love to hear in your own words what elements go in to one of your photographs. Like, what does it take for you to like put your name on this and say this one's a keeper?
That's a great question. I mean, when I spend 12 hours with a family, which is I haven't done in over a year because of COVID,
Hmm.
but when I have in the past, over the past few years, I'm getting hundreds of images throughout the day. I mean, I'll fill up 232 gig cards,
Hmm.
and I don't even know if that's accurate. I haven't done it in so long.
Sounds
But
right.
just like
We'll go with
hundreds
that.
of images.
Yeah.
And so like the first cull is usually going through and just getting rid of all the crap ones that are like not salvageable, too dark. Because if you think about it, if in a house you're changing lighting scenarios
Hmm.
every time you rotate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on a wedding day too, but like usually on a wedding day, if you're outside, you can keep your settings pretty much the same. But in
Sure.
a house, by a window is a lot different than when you turn around to get the other kid in the dark kitchen.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of just have to be scrapped images that I was moving too quick and didn't change my settings in time. But to put my stamp of approval on an image, there usually has to be an action happening. Like it can't just be like I have plenty of like a cute face that they're making at the camera, but it usually has to have an action of some sort.
Hmm.
Like they have to be picking their nose or picking a wedgie or eating something or yelling. I love having at least two subjects in the frame, whether that's a pet or a dog or a toy that they're playing with. It's just so much more interesting if there's more than just a pretty photo of a kid, because I
Yeah.
can take a pretty photo of a kid with my eyes closed. It's just so much more interesting and unique and tells such a stronger story if there's actually something happening in the image.
Hmm. So, how do you? What's the balance there between not wanting to create something versus
Mm-hmm.
just documenting what's happening?
You don't have to create something if there's kids involved. You just
Hmm.
don't. If you're there long enough, they will show you something weird. Kirsten always says that kids are weird, and
They
they
are weird.
are. They're so weird,
Yeah.
and if you reward the weird behavior with the click of a shutter, they'll do it 7 more times. So like if they jump off of it and you giggle and take a photo, they're
Uh-huh.
gonna be like, she liked that. I'm gonna do that again.
Sure.
And so I just am so rarely ever having to fabricate anything. And I don't like, I never ask them. There is at every family session, I will have them pose for a family portrait, but
Sure.
that's like 30 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. So this might be more of the customer service or the business side of things,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously that sort of behavior is probably not what parents think of as good behavior for,
Right.
a photo shoot. So how do you kind of deal with that communication with your clients so that they understand that that's okay?
Well, people don't inquire with me unless that's what they want. And
Mm-hmm.
that is like total positioning in the way I talk about photography and what I show. I
Mm-hmm.
will never, ever show. And this is the most valuable thing I learned at the beginning of my business was never ever show anything that you don't want to photograph,
Mm.
because what you show is the quickest way to tell people how you shoot. So if you don't want to pose people, never put a posed image on your feed or on your
Right.
website or on Facebook. You just you don't want to draw attention to things you're not going to shoot, because that sets your customers up for disappointment and unmet expectations. So for me, when people inquire with me, my process when I tell them what happens, I always say pajamas to pajamas. From the time your kids wake up in the morning till the time they go to bed, that's when I'm there. And I will just document everything that you do. And I always say, I will pull you guys aside in a calm moment when everybody's in a good mood to get a family portrait, but I will only do it once. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want more than that, I'm not the girl for you. And I typically send them a slideshow or a full gallery of somebody else's session. That way they can see kind of the lay of the land. Like, these are the images you're getting. There's going to be double chins, there's going to be kids picking their noses, there's going to be gross eating pictures because it's funny. And if they want that, then great. But, marketing 101, I'm not for everybody. I
Right.
know that 90% of moms don't want those kind of images, but the 10% who do are the ones that I'm here for.
Yeah. I hope everybody listening right now rewinds and listens to that whole thing again. It is so powerful. I'm sure that when you were doing that first session and you looked at Pinterest and found all those
Mm-hmm.
images and you tried it and maybe you nailed it and you're like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
great photo. Still, like, don't put that on your website. Like, don't
Mm-mm.
do that if that's not something that you want to do. And that kind of is kind of a strange segue, but I want to segue now into websites, because not only are you a photographer
Mm-hmm.
documenting families, but you also do copywriting for photographers. So you deal with the words on people's website. And as somebody who's like really bad with words myself, that's why I just talk to people rather than send them an interview questions. Can you tell me, did that stem from your photojournalism class?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
stemmed probably more. So, photojournalism led me to nonprofits and storytelling in that genre. And then nonprofits led me to family photography. They were each kind of a stepping stone into one another. And when I got into all these photography Facebook groups, because I did that first session and looked up all the Pinterest things, and I was like, all right, I got to learn what family photography is like if I'm going to give this a go. So I got into all those Facebook groups. It was like Restart, Jasmine Star's old Facebook group
Yeah.
so long ago, and like Rising Tide Society, like all of those, beginner groups. And I kept seeing people ask questions about their websites, and they would post little excerpts that they wrote, and I would just automatically in my head edit it. And then I was like intimidated because I was the newbie, so I didn't want to be commenting on things
Oh.
as the
Mm-hmm.
new person. But then I was like, wait a second, you've done this for a decade. Like, this is what you're trained to do, is to write. So I was like, okay, if this is how I can contribute to this group so I don't feel guilty asking a bunch of questions, that's totally what I'll do. So I just started helping people in Facebook comments in these groups edit their sites. And this was like back in 2014, probably. And eventually people were like, can I pay you to write this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And again, like, I did not get paid well for those first few sites, which is probably a good thing because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I am a writer for sure, and I was a copywriter for nonprofits, but writing to fundraise for a rescue mission is a lot different than writing to sell photography services.
Sure.
So, but that was kind of how I got my start there. And then I became very interested in both. So my business is both, and has been for a really long time now.
Oh my gosh, doing both. That is, that's. I was just gonna say I can't imagine that. But I guess I'm kind of doing the same thing with a podcast and
Yeah,
photography. But
you are doing exactly the same thing.
so what were the sort of things that people were talking about in Facebook groups? Like, what were they posting from their website into these Facebook groups that made you think like, oh my gosh, like these people need help? Like, what were
Yeah.
some of those common mistakes?
It was almost exclusively about pages.
Mm-hmm.
That people would post in there. And it's so funny to think about it now because my first offering was writing somebody's home and about page. And I would never do that now that I've like studied copywriting and taken all the courses and things like that. But because that was what people were so focused on. And now I know that like their experience and pricing page is just as important as their about page, if not more.
Yeah.
But a lot of the mistakes I saw on that about page was just talking so much about themselves, and though people really do want to know the person behind the lens, they ultimately want to know how your experience as a photographer and as a human serves them. And every copywriter will say this phrase, but you want to build the like, know, and trust factor. You want people to like you want people to know you, and you want people to trust you. And you should do that throughout your whole site, but on your about page, it's the most straightforward way to build that factor. So if you've done your research, like everyone should before they write their copy, you should have figured out not only what your people are going to like about you, but what they like about themselves and their interests. And then you kind of find the Venn diagram of where your interests and their interests meet. And that where they meet that's where what goes on your about page. And a lot of people like to talk about like, I love tacos and iced coffee. And it's my personal mission in life to be like, hey, you are more interesting than the food that you eat. So like find something new. And there's nothing wrong with it. I just think I always tell people to picture somebody looking at your website and having 10 tabs open of other photographers.
Mm-hmm.
What can you put on your tab that's going to make people say, I want to know more? It's probably not tacos and margs or iced coffee and cookies or whatever. Not that you can't have those things. You just have to show way more personality than that.
Sure. Okay, so this is where this is going to get fun because when you reached out and were like, hey, I think I can help out listeners of the podcast. I was like, okay, let's see let's give them some actionable tips on exactly how to do that. So rather than you just telling us what to do, because sometimes I get lost, sometimes people like, I don't know, barbecue and brews or whatever it is. Instead,
hey,
I
barbecue
said,
would be a step up from tacos. Everybody talks
good,
about
good,
tacos.
good. But I challenged you with ripping apart my own personal website. So that is exactly what we're gonna do right now. So you have my website, you have it up, and which, if anybody's listening right now, it's just rhatfieldphotography.com. And I think you're going to hear some of the changes that I'm going to make after this. But as far as my website goes, I will tell you that I would say the homepage and my about me are probably the two that I think that I need the most help with. But I'm also not. I don't specialize in copywriting, so I would love to hear your process. What's the first thing that you look for when you're on my website, or what's the first thing that's standing out to you?
You are listening to the free version of the Beginner Photography Podcast, where each week you learn how world-class photographers see and capture the world around them. If you want to hear the extended interview with their best business tips to learn how to make money with your camera, then become a premium member today by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button to join now.
I like that. I'm definitely going to go through here and fix a lot of those. So again, thank you so much for.
Yeah, you are so welcome.
So I guess one last question for you.
Yeah.
Home, about me, then experience, then pricing and contact?
Then pricing, then blog, then contact.
Okay, gotcha. So take out the kind words, replace that with experience. Gotcha.
That's
so
what I would do.
At the bottom of the About Me page should be see what it's like to work with me and go to an experience page. Love it. Okay. Rachel, I seriously cannot tell you how much I appreciate all that help that you just gave me, even
Oh my
though
gosh,
it
literally
was
anytime.
embarrassing about you know I'm 33 years old. I should know when to use your and your, right? So
Oh,
but
you
no,
would be
seriously.
shocked at how many people get that one wrong. You're fine.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. But again, yeah, so thank you so much for, again, tearing this apart, because I know that, with a lot of the things that you said, at least for me, I feel like I try to do things maybe in order, or I try to do things in a way that I'm told or whatever. So then I
Hmm.
just do them, but then I almost never get any sort of feedback based on that.
Right,
So it's just
right.
kind of like in this vacuum. So for you
Hmm.
to just look at it kind of objectively and say, like, well, I like this, or I don't like this, or you definitely got to get rid of this,
Yeah.
really gives me a lot of clarity in what needs to happen here. And I know is going to, I was gonna say make myself look bigger, but or better, but also help my couples as well to kind of make that decision that, yeah, he's right for me or he's
Hmm.
not right for me
Hmm.
at all. So
Your
again,
website copy isn't about booking clients as much as it is about booking better clients. Like I always
oh
tell people that I love when my work helps make people money. I love that. That is not my priority, though. My
yeah,
priority is to make your life better, and your life is better when you're working with the people you want to work with.
oh, I love that's. I feel like there's no better way to end it than that right there. That's like
Good.
words of wisdom right there. That's going to be a notable quote from this episode right here. So
Great.
Rachel, I do have to say, thank you again for coming on, sharing everything
Yeah.
that you did. And I mean, I'm still a little sore about the work that you did here on my website, but it's all wonderful stuff that I know is truly going to help me in the end. And we do have to take that look at it. But for those who are listening right now and thinking to themselves, like, man, I would love to get something like this done for me. Where can they learn more about you, or copywriting for themselves, or
Yeah.
having you do it for them?
Yeah. I have a very updated blog. So people can get free content there. I have tons of posts about copywriting and ways to make your copy better. I have tons of posts on Instagram, more free content for you if you want. I have a do it yourself guide that you can buy on my website, greenchairstories.com. And it basically is a cheap guide that walks you through how to write your own website copy. It has a lot of the questions that I asked Raymond and kind of walks you through the things you need to be thinking about and the format to lay out your site to make it make sense to you and to bring clients in that you want to work with. And then on my website, there's also ways to work with me one-on-one if you want more information about that. And you can get a website audit, a much more extensive version of what I just did. But yeah, so it's all on my website if you want to check it
I don't know if I could handle a more extensive version of what you did here today. I mean, you really, again, you didn't hold back. You really went all in. And again, all I got to say is thank you so much for coming on, sharing everything that you did, helping me out in more ways than one, and providing just a ton of value to the listeners. So, Rachel, thank you so much. And I look forward to keeping up with you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
I gotta say, that was so much fun. Very rarely do we get that level of interaction with a guest. Typically when I interview somebody, I want to know as much as I can about them, and oftentimes the attention isn't pointed towards me. But when we were talking about my website or the things that needed changed, whew, I gotta tell you, it's hard to be on the other side of the microphone here, I guess you could say, and being the one who is I don't know, being talked about, or being discussed. So again, if you're a premium member and you listen to that, I would love to know what you are going to implement and put into your website, what things you're going to change. And if you're a free member, I would also love to hear from you as far as, Rachel's journey into photography and how she sees the world. What was really interesting was, talking about her family approach, and being there to capture these photos. I mean, she's there for an entire day, like an entire day. And that is just so cool. Could you do something like that? Could you do? I mean, it's interesting. I hear from many people, talking about wanting to do something like this, and that is, when it comes to talking with families, very rarely do they want to or bring you into their house, because they're always worried about, it's dirty, and who knows, we just know that we don't live like in a catalog house. Nobody lives in like a catalog house, and everybody's concerned that the photos are going to make them look like, I don't know, trash or whatever. But if you go to the show notes of this episode and you look at some of Rachel's photos, you can see that like that's not the case at all. A lot of her photos are, in average homes, but she's able to produce just beautiful work and capture some really, really incredible moments. And, the testimonials that she has on her website as well are just, you can see that she really takes care of her clients, and her clients really appreciate what she is able to document for them. So again, with the copywriting, if you are interested, if you have a website, if you're thinking about starting a website, you're going to need an about page. Otherwise, people are just looking at photos, which they do all day on, Facebook or Instagram, wherever it is. You got to have something to stand out, and that's going to be the words on your website. So Rachel actually has a kind of a DIY copywriting course for photographers just like you, available on her website. Compared to paying a copywriter, it's an incredible value. So you can go ahead and check that out. She has information at greenchairstories.com, and Rachel was kind enough to give you, the listeners, a coupon code for 15% off if you do decide to purchase her copywriting course and, make better words on your website, which you can, the coupon code is beginner15. Again, use that. You're going to get 15% off and save even more on what is, an incredible value for what it is that she delivers. So again, you can find that at greenchairstories.com. That is it for this week. Again, I would love to hear your biggest takeaways from this episode. You can go ahead and share them in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community, which you can find just by going to Facebook, searching Beginner Photography Podcast. You'll find it there. And that is it. Until next week, I want you to keep shooting. I want you to, click that shutter button. I want you to take more photos, and I want you to connect with somebody, whether it be the person in front of your camera or somebody online, through the photos that you share. So that is it this week. Until next week, stay safe. Keep shooting. I love you all. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.
You guys just moved across the country? Mm-hmm. So from where, are you currently in Colorado, or did you move out of Colorado? You're in Colorado.
We lived in Colorado for 8 years. And then 2 years ago, we moved back to Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And then we moved back out here in March. So yeah, it's been wild.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And do you have children as well?
Yes, I have two.
Two. Are they young children?
Yes, I have a
How did
2-year-old
they deal with it?
and a 10-month-old. They both
2-year-old and 10 months.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is not when you would think, hey, you know what? Let's pack up and put them in a car and let's move across the country.
Yeah, it's just, my husband got a great job offer. He's from here, Colorado. I'm from Pennsylvania. And so he just got this fantastic offer out of nowhere. And we were just like, we weren't thinking about moving back, but I guess we'll talk about it. And COVID was just it was so wild. And we didn't get to see as much of my family as I wanted. And they live out in the country. I'm from Lancaster, which is like Amish country. And so it was like, we're not really close to them and we don't want to move closer. So we might as well just go back to Colorado.
Have you guys got a house or what's the deal?
We move in on Saturday.
Oh, so you guys moved without a house, found the house, and then had to go, oh my God, in one of like the craziest housing markets ever.
I can't even describe. We put an offer on a house, not the one we got, for $75,000 over asking price. And we were the 8th offer in line. Yeah. The winning bid was $125,000 over asking price. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was insane. We were just like, we're never going to get a house. And then the next day we put an offer in and they accepted. We were like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
We were like,
did we just overpay for this house?
Yeah.
Are they the crazy ones?
Yeah, they were the crazy ones.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.